right here. So the lands that the park now stand, he privately owned their lifetime home. Recently, Navy came to the military's attention shortly after the Spanish-American War, when the Navy sought a more isolated place than Chelsea for its main East Coast ammunition depot. Starting in 1906, the Navy began buying property, some through eminent domain, in the crescent-shaped area bordered by Route 3A, West and Fort River Streets, and the Back and Fresh Rivers. Construction on the base began in 1911, and the Navy established the Hingham Naval Ammunition Depot, also known as Hockley Hollow, on the site. In 1917, Camp Hingham Naval Station, a training camp, was established as well. Camp Hingham, which included 17 barracks and a hospital, was demolished in 1925, but the ammunition depot remained. At its peak, the Hingham Naval Ammunition Depot employed over 2,400 people, both civilians and military personnel, and in their downtime, those living at the depot had an on-site Howard Johnson's restaurant for dining, which was right over here. Fast fact. I didn't know that either when we started this. Ammunition wasn't its only business. The base was expanded to include the Naval Materials Handling Laboratory. While that may not sound glamorous, as assembling top-secret fuses, the Navy could not have sustained operations halfway around the world without advances in shipping techniques and equipment. The base at Bare Cove was decommissioned in 1961. After the base was closed, the Army Corps of Engineers swept the area for hazardous materials, and the Navy turned the 905-acre site over to the town of Hingham in 1972. 32 acres of land in the northern shore, owned by the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife Bare Cove Park, were combined with 484 acres of the Naval Ammunition Depot to create Bare Cove Park, which opened as a wildlife sanctuary and recreation area in 1974.
Any questions?
Do you want to say anything, Jim?
No, I just wanted to say, I get lost here up there someplace. When they bought all the property, they bought everything they could on either side of the river, except where we're talking about where the tomb is. 'Cause that was there since 1833-4. And they respected the fact that there was what it was. It was an almshouse. It was the town infirmary. It wasn't at that time, but later on it became the town infirmary. And when they get to World War I, the government proposed taking over the almshouse property, which was 43 acres at the northern end. And they didn't do it right then and there. And after World War I ended, they changed their mind and they didn't bother with it at all. Then we went up to World War II, and at that time, halfway through 43, they decided we better buy that. So they took that from the town for $43,000. And that became the whole part of it, except for the wildlife people up the other end that gave it to the town recently.
Mm-hmm.
That belonged to the Navy, and then it wound up with the state because they had they wanted to take the land, and they had to go to the DPW because they could take it because of Route 3A. They could take the adjacent land, and then it became split up with them and the boat people there, the harbor people there. What's the name? The environmental people.
Mm-hmm.
Environmental people will do the islands and stuff.
Okay, well, welcome to our park, and I hope you've all enjoyed, as my brother would put it, the foliage. Yeah, it's a really beautiful scene. And as you walked over here just now, you passed what's called the Green Dock Museum. So because it's Halloween, I have a little treat for you. So if you could pass those out, in case you want to get more information about the park and about any of the surrounding area here. But I actually did this whole kiosk on both sides, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a description of what this stuff is. But before that, I just want to ask, anybody here from out of state? Nobody like from out of state? Okay, I was going to put it on my resume, but. Okay.
from out of state, this gentleman here.
Okay, so I'm gonna put that on my resume. They came from out of state to hear this message.
And I can buy
So this kiosk will be our starting point, and we don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna be pretty quick. But on this side, it's dedicated to the park, and if you go around the other side, we pay tribute to three aspects of Hingham. One would be Herbert L. Foss. He won the Medal of Honor during the Spanish-American War, and what he did was he cut the cable that linked Cuba to Spain, and at that time I would imagine was telegraph. So that was in 1898. So that's on the other side. We'll get back to Herbert in a little bit because he's part of the story on the front here. But there's also a map of Wampatuck State Park that I did, and I took all the grid lines off so you can see it. It's a map you won't see anyplace else. It's unique. So Bare Cove Park used to be a Hingham Naval Ammunition Depot, and the Wampatuck State Park was the Cohasset Annex. It was actually a part of this base, and it was open after around World War II. And then the third thing we have is a little tribute to the Hingham Shipyard, which is across the way. And during World War II, they built 227 ships in 3 years, which is like astounding because I can't even get my car fixed like in 3 years. So, but anyway, let me start on this side. We're getting back to Herbert L. Foss now. I don't know if anybody knows who this is. He's John D. Long. He was the governor of Massachusetts for a while, but he was the Secretary of the Navy during the Spanish-American War. So I have a little spiel that I do, something that I came up, it's my own work, and what I would call it would be some sort of, I think I have it down here, yeah, I would call it redundancy or some sort of like, I don't know. But let me tell you a story about what happened with John D. Long. So in 1897, the president at the time elected was William McKinley. And he appointed John D. Long to be the Secretary of the Navy. Well, as concession to other people, he put Teddy Roosevelt in as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. So this is in 1897. Well, one day John D. Long was out of the office, and Teddy started a war in the Philippines. And they hated each other. So anyway, that led to the Spanish-American War. So he was the Secretary of the Navy during the Spanish-American War. Well, what happened was Teddy Roosevelt resigned as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He got a resignation with the Secretary of War at the time to be commissioned as Lieutenant Colonel of the U.S. Corps, and he had been to Cuba, and he fought the Battle of San Juan Hill, came back, and he was elected governor of New York. Well, later on, McKinley was assassinated up in Buffalo, New York, and so Teddy becomes the President of the United States. Well, Long is still Secretary of the Navy. This is only a couple of months later. So now you can imagine, here's the guy that you hate is now your boss. And so what happened was John D. Long ended up, he resigned and stepped down from being Secretary of the Navy, came back here to Hingham. And in 1903, they authorized the building of this naval base here. And it was attributed to John D. Long, but he kind of dismissed it. It was during his tenure that they made the plans, and he said he didn't know anything about it. So that's for you to decide. But when you look at the original owner's map, and you see how many people displaced and how much property he took this entire thing, and he came back to Hingham, these people were not too happy. So he says he knows nothing about it. And then, so in 1917, they actually built a naval training station here, and the training station was for World War I, and that closed in about 1923. But over here, you see some of these other pictures of the buildings that used to be here. And then during World War II, we supplied the entire Atlantic fleet with munitions. And so this base here, between here, the shipyard, and Wampatuck, or the Cohasset Annex, we would have been speaking German today without what happened here. So it was really a significant war effort that took place here, and it's kind of hard to imagine as you look around today because it doesn't appear to be a military type town.
Also, the Four River Shipyard, too.
You had the Four River Shipyard too, that's correct. But we're in Hingham, so. Yeah, it's got a crazy for that. And by the way, the museum will be open on Sunday, this Sunday, from 10 to 1. And then in November, it will be open the second and the fourth Sunday of the month from 10 to 1. That's that green building right over there that you passed. So I'll let you look at those things, and if anybody has any questions.
That's pretty cool.
So here's the sign that I saw when I came out after I saw the murder site, this first site. And so there's $45 million plus condos between the second and third building. Right in the middle of the road is where the Almshouse was. And it was occupied during the years of 1831 to 1931 or 2. The second Almshouse burned down, and so they relocated to this area. And it's right in the middle of the road where it was built. So we're thinking the proximity of a cemetery. You didn't want to have a body. It was prior to hydraulics. So if you're going to dig human remains in the summertime, but in the wintertime, you would need some sort of storage facility to house a body. So they built it 5 years into it. So about 1836. It cost them $147. We have the bill of sale for when they were built. And again, Jim, it was the first lockup for the town of Hingham. It was the first cells. Now think back to mental illness. This was a period of time before there were some of the catch-alls that helped folks during COVID. Social welfare policy, food stamps, elder care facilities. There were no nursing homes in Massachusetts. So if you were feeble-minded, dementia, you were put into an almshouse. If your husband predeceased you and you were a female, you were put into a almshouse, and children. So there were over 200 people that probably came through those doors seeking solace, help. There was a farm where Lynch Field was. And then what happened was Stephen Beal, that you just met, in college, he was telling us that he worked at the Almshouse. It was no longer an almshouse. It was a drug rehab center called Spectrum Health. So it was to help people along trying to overcome addiction. And he doesn't remember the cells in the basement, but there are officers that have done like a history of the park that have said those were cells. When Jim and I started to pull our research, we pulled records from the Taunton Insane Hospital, which is what it was called. And what we determined, the majority of folks that went up there, probably because of losing their minds towards the end of their stage of life, were brought back in body bags. So it was cheaper if you didn't have somebody to advocate for you to come back in a body bag and have your human remains buried here along Bare Cove Park. The next thing that happens is once the Almshouse 1932 was finished, it came out of its contract with the town or the state.
That's when Medicare started,
Social Security. So what happened next was a developer, Tom Hastings, came in, saw an opportunity.
Before that, 1932, Social Security started. So that alleviated the town so much of some of the burden, shifted the burden, if you will, over to the state. And then they went along and along and along. World War II shows up, right? This place is still government owned. Now they got to gear it all up for World War II now, So they do that. And it wasn't until 1943 that some rule changed somewhere up in Beacon Hill probably, that you needed a larger buffer zone to operate. Because Beal Street used to be the Hingham and Quincy Turnpike. Used to be a toll booth there. Where the 99 is. Beal Street? Yeah, a toll booth to go up. There was no 3A. Wow. 3A was part of the shipyard. At the time, you couldn't go from Marshfield Hills up to Quincy for ice cream.
You'll say hi to all right. Beal Street's a nice street, but it's a good.
Well, yeah, but that used to be a turnpike. And recently at town meetings, John Riley, who lived on, and he was a selectman, used to complain they go too fast up the light, form 3 2 or 3 sets of lights that they run through downtown, to go to Cohasset and Situate. That was an issue. But anyway, back to this. Everything reminds you of something that's related, you know? In 1943, the government came to the town. They bought everything in '03 and '04 except this. They respected this fact that this was a town farm and there was sick people, infirmary, old, blind, crippled, crazy, whatever, lived there. So they didn't touch it until 1943 when the need came about to create a bigger buffer zone to 3A, Beal Street. The only way to do that was to control the property. So they bought the property from the town of Hingham for $43,000. But people that lived in the house, they didn't toss them out. They seemed to live there till 1949, according to the voting records. So there was 6 or 7 or 8, 10 people, stragglers that didn't die yet, living in the house. And it cheated away, but and I'm sure the government used the rest of the house for whatever they want.
And the house that was in the presentation, is a picture of it, I think. Does it?
Yeah,
It's really cool.
People on the website, there must be. You want one here?
Presented one.
Was that they lost all the burial records for the cemetery for the Almshouse. So the folks, we have 159 names. It was part of the literature that I believe Zoe sent to you. So if you're a hobbyist and you like to track ancestry.com, you'll see a list of names that we can't, out of all of our research, we can't fully determine where they've been buried. And what we're going to show you at the tomb, there's an added bonus for you, waiting for you down there. If it says you were buried in the town tomb, that's where you're buried. So why don't we take a little quick walk right around the corner up here, and then we'll go back to the burial tomb and finish up. That were graffitied, and this area was all locked, so it was restricted to the public. People came in here seldom with their dogs, not what you saw today. And then in 2005, these two gentlemen were friends. They were at Father Bill's homeless shelter. They were living in that bunker that you just saw that I showed you. And William Schrappen, 46, and he's the gentleman on the, it would be on your left, yes. Yeah, 46, and David Lyons. So they were good friends. They came from really lovely families, and something happened in their lives, as it does. And they found themselves living in this military bunker. And 2 young men from Hingham who had criminal records since the age of 9 years old, and something went awry with these 2 guys. Eric Snow is on the left, and James Winquist is on the right. They came in looking for homeless so they could earn their bones. They were part of a cult that they called the Brotherhood of Bones. And they came in with spiked baseball bats, and they knew, very much aware that in that bunker there were 2 men living there. They proceeded to beat them and laugh when they heard the crunching of their skulls, and severed the naval veteran's hand off, put it in a plastic bag, brought it to a party that night with a group of kids. They were 23 and 24 years old. And somebody was alarmed. It was in a cooler. And they reported it to the police. And then Eric Snow, so the young man, this young man here, has a tattoo on the back of his neck that says Killa. Killa, and Street Thug. And his tattoo is wasted. So this gentleman is still in prison. He was out for parole last year. He was denied, thankfully. But if you look at his criminal history, it's prolific. He had been a problem since he was 9. And he documented every feature in this park, and he has an archives up at the Historical Society that you can go look. Well, he and Mary Toomey, my mom's teacher, came in here, and they needed to find something of value because there was the Hingham Insurance Company was scoping a building to build right on the river. They didn't want to have them build on the river, so John and Mary teamed up because they were creating this park, and John states that he found human remains in a foxtailing, which is a foxhole, very close to where we're going to take you next. I mean, the chances of finding human remains in a foxtailing, those human remains were then, the state of Massachusetts came in, they closed this area. What happens is they deemed they were Native American, it was a Native American woman and her 3 babies. So they exhumed the bones, they don't disclose where they're going to be re-exhumed. But Mary Toomey, Jim had the stationery from the teacher Mary Toomey writing on her little stationery to her friend, X marks the spot of where they were exhumed and then laid to rest. So if you're in the park and you want to see something cool, you go up all the way to the end where the bridge meets the water. You'll see a marsh and rocks. You go up into this little forest area where the bridge ends, and there's a room underneath the bridge. How somebody has not hurt themselves in there. It's not secured, and it's the gunner shack. So the gunners would post when it was the ammunition depot to see if there was any enemy ships coming in or any unsavory individuals that might do harm to the ammunition depot. They've never secured it, but that is where on Jim's map that he has from Mary Toomey, in that area is where they laid her to rest with her children. So this has a lot of Native American history as well. People have found spearheads here when they've gone down to the river. And Stephen Gill just sent Jim and I, but Jim already had it. And we were going to go into the tombs. Right above the tombs, on this map that John Richardson was responsible for, it says 1973 Native American bones. So that's where they must have found them. So now we're going to take you to the tombs.
That was in 73 from the.
1973.
Just wanted to say, back in the day, they built the Almshouse in 1833 here, and they didn't build these tombs until 1838. So you figure out what happened in between. Nobody lives forever, and people started dying, and they didn't know what to do with them in the winter. So they went to town meeting in 1838 and asked the town, hey, we got a problem here. We need to build a vault to store the bodies over the winter. And there it is, right down there on all their lists, $116 built this tomb. Money, as a rule. Some of them may have had money. Maybe you had a crazy Aunt Millie or Aunt Edith, and you didn't know what to do with her in the house, so she winds up in the almshouse, you know? But maybe your family had money, right? So maybe when she dies at the almshouse, you don't let them bury her, you claim her and take her and pay at some cemetery to get buried in. Hey, there's 6 cemeteries in town, and Hingham doesn't own any of them.
They own this one,
Except
though.
this one.
The town owns this park.
Right,
Yes.
well, yes, they did.
And they own this
Until
cemetery.
they didn't, you know.
The others
Oh,
are
I
private.
see.
You see?
Yeah.
They owned it when the people died here and were buried here. Now they don't know where they went because they got rid of all the land.
But this is like a town park as far as I know.
A what?
A town park? This is
Yeah,
Hingham.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that is, this isn't.
Right. I
That is,
understand.
this isn't.
I understand.
Nothing is up this side of the street anymore,
Right.
except the ball fields. Maybe they're buried in the ball fields. Maybe they're buried under the condos.
In John's, or maybe they were carried away in the back of a dump truck.
Maybe they
We
went
don't
away
know.
and if
Yeah.
if you saw the hole they dug for these 2 buildings here, the dirt piles were 40 feet high. So some of them were clear cut to 10 feet down, right? So whatever was within 10 feet of the topsoil is gone.
And Jack,
No.
this gentleman here with the beautiful blue eyes, not to embarrass you, Jack, he was at the library with us, and when we did it last October, and there was a woman who raised her hand, and she said they found human remains when they were deconstructing the insurance company. They found human remains. So it was amazing. We didn't invite her. We didn't even know who she was.
Well, John Richardson told them they were going to find them. You know, he was an advocate of not building it here, which forced them up there, and then they did the digging. And you know, you got to remember the Hingham Institute, the insurance company, was the oldest operating business in Hingham at the time. And then, as it turns out, the Almshouse wound up being the oldest building that the town of Hingham ever owned.
Do you know when the insurance company was the origin date of the insurance company? Is it before? When they
It's the
started?
first one. It's the first. No, I don't know exactly, I shouldn't say.
No, so
But it's the oldest operating company in Hingham at the time. Now it's got sold to some company in Connecticut.
wow.
What is that
not even
structure
here
there, that
anymore.
big pole you said? What?
Oh, so there was, just like the Green Dock Museum, there was a building in between, so it was, there were lightning rods,
Oh, okay.
because the
okay.
buildings, I
It was
think, were
very
Okay.
metal.
flammable. so-
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Very dangerous.
They're lightning rods for the
rod.
Alms house?
No, they were lightning rods for an ammunition depot,
Oh, I see,
just,
okay.
yeah. So thank you, everybody. If you're thinking about it, these people walk the planet, and there's
And
no
another thi-
recognition of these people being contributors to society,
Let me
so
interrupt
thank you for
a minute.
visiting their cemetery.
There are also 25 streets in Hingham named. Want to bury them, they didn't want to pay for them, or they didn't want to take care of them, who knows, you know? But this place was available at that time as an alternative to home care, if you will.
We want to get you back before it's dark.
Thank you.
Two men
Okay.
buried.